around the moon, the idea of putting a lander on the moon was not something that was in the budget. So I always caution people, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. And talk is cheap in space, and it's easy to make directives. But at NASA's current funding levels, the idea of going to the moon and landing and putting footprints and flags there, as is suggested, probably about a $100 billion proposition just on its own right, could very well derail that larger effort to go to Mars. And that's always the concern. Does the moon become a way station, a hopping off point, or might it become a dead end?
Last quick question, because you heard the president mention jobs. This will mean jobs. True?
Yeah, the truth is, all those billions we spend on space, we don't bundle them up, put them in bags, and put them in the spaceship. We keep them here on Earth. We hire people, we hire engineers, we hire people to bend the aluminum. It's been proven time and again that it's good for the economy.
Okay. Miles O'Brien, thank you so much. To the moon and Mars. Good to see you. Let's move on, though, and get to the breaking story of the day here, this attempted terror attack this morning in the heart of New York City. We now know the man accused of strapping this homemade pipe bomb to his chest and detonating it at the Port Authority bus terminal. He's talking. He's a 27-year-old suspect, Bangladeshi descent, living in Brooklyn, now telling investigators that he did this. This is because of the recent Israeli actions in Gaza that drove him to his act of terror. He is said to have made this explosive device at his workplace, although it's still unclear actually what he does for work after leaving his former job as a taxi driver. So let's go to Jen Grass to set all of this up for us. She's our CNN correspondent there near Times Square, near the scene of the explosion. And so we're saying that the suspect is talking. What are investigators sharing with you?
Well, yeah, we're learning a lot through those conversations that the suspect, 27-year-old Ullah, is having with investigators in his hospital room. I want to add to the fact that he told them that he did this because of those recent Israeli actions in Gaza. He also told investigators he did this in the name of ISIS. Now, that's another thing that law enforcement now is going to look into, if there's sort of any background to that, any social media interactions, any visits to foreign countries to support that claim that he made to investigators in those initial conversations. I know you just mentioned that he said that he made this bomb at his work. A little bit of conflicting information there. We're also hearing it's possible he made this at his home, a home that he had in Brooklyn, in a building that he actually shared a separate apartment with his brother. We're told that he made that pipe bomb about a week ago in his apartment. Again, it's now up to investigators, they say, to go talking to his brother, but not just his brother alone. It's always part of the procedure for investigators to talk to any family members or any known associates that they can talk to glean more information as to exactly what his motives were and the steps he took in order to bring us to where we are today. Also, I just want to mention, Brooke, we just learned from a law enforcement source that he and his brother most recently did electrical work in this area of the Port Authority just a few blocks away. So that was the most recent work that we've heard about this Ullah, that he did it with his brother. Before that, we had known that he was a cab driver, driving a cab most recently several years ago, Brooke.
Okay, got the new details for us. Bryn, thank you so much. Keep digging. I've got Chelsea LaSalle joining us, was at the Port Authority this morning when the bomb was detonated. She's with me on the phone. And Chelsea, I mean, my goodness, how scary that must have been for you, happening in the middle of rush hour there, I presume, as you were heading off to work. Tell me where you were and what you saw.
Yeah, I was at Port Authority bus station, and I was headed down to the subway station. And as I was walking down, I heard a lot of people screaming very, very loudly, and I kind of stopped in my tracks there for a second and waited to see if anything else would happen. And as I waited, a ton of people just started running up the stairs screaming, "Go, go, get out, bomb," and people just started like stampeding up the stairs. So I followed suit, turned around, and ran out of the building.
We're looking at some of the video from this morning. How smoky, how loud was the explosion?
I, luckily enough, was not far enough down the subway station to see any of it or hear any of it. I must have missed it by probably 2 minutes, but judging by the way that everybody sounded, it was pretty bad.
And I think, if you don't live in the city, people maybe don't understand. I mean, when we say Port Authority, this is like the nexus. This is where so many people early in the morning taking the bus or trying to take the train, right, heading out. This is prime time.
Yep. It was crazy. I mean, the amount of people that were there, you know, a lot of people were just confused as people were running up the stairs. A lot of people just didn't know what was going on. I know my uncle, who I had just left at Port Authority, he was on one of the upper levels, and he got shoved into a store, and they shut all of the doors, and he, like, was not able to get out at all. So I can't even imagine what that was like.
Chelsea, I'm glad you're okay. I know your family is all glad to hear your healthy voice on national television. Thank goodness, as it could have been so much worse. Appreciate you taking the time to call in. Thank you. I've got two more voices now. Matthew Horace, former ATF executive, and James Galliano, CNN law enforcement analyst and retired FBI supervisory special agent. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me. And James, just turning to you first. My first thought was, if this wasn't supposed to go off this morning, right, if this was just a whoops and he was intending to take it somewhere else, isn't the question, well, where, and was he trying to maximize eventually, and this was an accident? We don't know, I guess.
Brooke, we dodged a bullet this morning.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, you know the old law enforcement adage, law enforcement has to get it right every time. Bad guys only have to get it right once. What leads us to believe that it might have been a premature detonation is he did not pick the most opportune spot for this. Now, you were just showing the video there and saw the corridor there that was filled with smoke. A properly constructed pipe bomb, the overpressure itself, would have shattered eardrums and squashed organs and probably caused a lot more carnage there. We are lucky and blessed that there were only 3 woundings in this instance.
So, Matthew, what are they looking at now as far as how this bomb was made? You heard Bryn reporting maybe it was made at his home as recently as last week, but what are investigators and ATF folks looking at right now?
Well, they're going to be trying to determine how it was constructed, where the materials that made the pipe bomb came from. We can tell if it's galvanized pipe, where it was purchased. If it's PVC pipe, what are the date shift codes? Was there black powder, smokeless powder? Was there shrapnel inside? And when we find out where he did purchase it, did he purchase materials for other devices? And if those devices exist, where are they?
The White House, James Galliano, says that their immigration plan would have kept this guy out of the country. True?
Very, very difficult to say. We know he's from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is in South Asia. It's situated between India and Thailand. We do know some of the counterterrorism experts are saying that there has been an uptick in kind of terrorist activities there. Very difficult to say that. The subject had been inside the country for a number of years now, and apparently while he's being interviewed now, he's saying that this has something to do with Israeli actions in Gaza Strip.
But also it's because of ISIS.
Because of ISIS, and we also know that in the Gaza Strip, Israel and Hamas have had a ceasefire there since 2004. From the law enforcement perspective, the most important thing here is to make sure that this wasn't directed by a terrorist group, whether it was ISIS or someone else. It was only inspired, because clearly the rudimentary components of the bomb, the way that it went off, it was kind of a Keystone Cop kind of exercise, helps us, or at least leads us in the direction this might have been only a lone wolf attack.
All right, James and Matthew, thank you both so much on that and what happened this morning. Thank goodness it wasn't worse. Meantime, right now, voters in Alabama are getting robocalls from President Obama and President Trump. We are now 24 hours to go before polls open in a Senate race with national implications. We'll talk about whether even President Obama's involvement could backfire. And moments ago, what a contentious White House briefing that was. The White House once again repeating the claim that more than a dozen allegations of sexual harassment and assault involving President Trump are false. And now a new senator adding her name to the list of lawmakers saying the president should resign. We'll be right back.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally found.
Call 1-800-831-3700.
You are watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thanks for being with me. Full court press is on in these final hours here before tomorrow's critical U.S. Senate race in Alabama. Despite the national reckoning against these accused sexual harassers and violators, President Trump is fully embracing Republican Roy Moore for the U.S. Senate. Moore, as you know, is accused of sexually abusing a 14-year-old girl, sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl, and pursuing relationships with other teenagers when he was in his 30s. So here is President Trump's robocall to voters there.
Hi, this is President Donald Trump, and I need Alabama to go vote for Roy Moore. If Alabama elects liberal Democrat Doug Jones, all of our progress will be stopped cold.
As for Moore's opponent, the Democrat here, Doug Jones, tonight, primarily African-American voters in Alabama will be getting a robocall from former President Barack Obama urging a vote for the Democratic candidate. But moments ago at a campaign event, Doug Jones didn't even seem to know that.
What is your strategy with utilizing that robocall from former President Obama, knowing that many Alabama voters here in the state did not support President Obama?
Well, you know, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm way up here, and there are robocalls that have been recorded that I'm not sure what's all's going out there. The only robocall that I know for a fact that was recorded, and this is true, the only one I know for a fact that was recorded was the one that my wife did, and she's told me directly.
Let's go to Alabama to our correspondent there, Caitlin Collins. She is in Midland City, where the president's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, will be there stumping for Roy Moore. So, Caitlin, we just saw Doug Jones talking about his wife in a robocall he certainly knows about. What about Roy Moore? I know he was kind of MIA over the weekend. Where is he today?
MIA is a great way to put it, Brooke, and we have not seen Roy Moore. He has not held any public events since his last rally last Tuesday with Steve Bannon in Fairhope, Alabama, and the first time we're seeing him in a week is here tonight at this barn behind me, again with Steve Bannon, and that's quite unusual, and we're in the 11th hour of this high-stakes, highly contested race, and Roy Moore has not really done any public events with reporters or supporters or anything that we've seen, and that's certainly something the Doug Jones campaign has been taking advantage of, because they sent out an email to supporters today touting all of the things he's done, traveling statewide. They say that they've done hundreds of events in the last 2 months and knocked on 80,000 doors this weekend alone. Now, the only time that we did hear from Roy Moore this weekend was on Sunday, because he taped an interview with a local outlet where he denied the allegations made against him, saying he's never molested anyone and he did not meet any of the women who have accused him of sexual assault. However, that interview came the same day that we saw a very stunning comment from the senior Republican senator here in Alabama, Senator Richard Shelby, who I should note does not often do television interviews, but he went on CNN with Jake Tapper, and he said he just couldn't bring himself to vote for Roy Moore.
I didn't vote for Roy Moore. I wouldn't vote for Roy Moore. I think the Republican Party can do better. I think so many accusations, so many cuts, so many drip, drip, drip. When it got to the 14-year-old story, that was enough for me. I said, I can't vote for Roy Moore.
Now, those comments from a Republican senator come as Democratic manpower has been filling into the state over the last few days, with lawmakers like Senator Cory Booker coming into the state to campaign on behalf of Doug Jones. We've got Vice President Joe Biden sending out emails about him, and then also former President Barack Obama recording robocalls on his behalf. So it's certainly stunning here, Brooke, that we're even discussing the possibility of a Democrat victory in a deeply conservative state like Alabama.
Ruby Red, Alabama. Caitlin Collins, looking forward to seeing that rally tonight, and more coming out from the rock he's been under, I guess, for the last couple of days. Let's have a bigger conversation. Caitlin, thank you. Let's turn now to CNN political commentator Dan Pfeiffer, a former senior advisor in the Obama White House, and CNN political commentator Andre Bauer, a former Republican lieutenant governor of South Carolina. Gentlemen, welcome to you. And I want to... Dan, just to you, I mean, we both heard the soundbite from Doug Jones, and that was the second I've heard where he's asked about this, President Obama robocall, and he's kind of like, well, I don't think I totally know about it. Listen, the only robocall I know about is from my wife, which I think is really telling of this election in general. But Dan, do you think former President Obama's presence will help or hurt the Democrat in this race?
Well, I think it has to help.
Does it have to?
Yes, it does have to help. In these special elections, it's all about turning out your voters. President Obama is incredibly popular with Democrats in Alabama and across the country. And what these robocalls, whether it's President Obama's robocall or Donald Trump's robocall or Doug Jones' wife's robocall, is about reminding people that you believe would support you to go out and vote. And so this is going to be about reminding people to vote.
Why is he so totally playing it down? It's almost like he's pretending like he doesn't know it's happened.
I think my only guess for that, I don't really know, is other than you don't want to be talking about political process in the last few days. He has a very strong case to make against Roy Moore, an accused child molester, someone who believes Muslims shouldn't serve in Congress, women shouldn't vote or serve in office, and he needs to keep the focus on that, not on who's recording robocalls for him.
So, Andre, my question is really the same for you. Do you think this President Obama robocall in Ruby Red, Alabama, do you think that'll end up helping Roy Moore?
Well, I actually appreciate the president getting involved because I want more people to get out and vote overall, but I actually don't think it'll help. I think back to in my 20s, I ran for a special election Senate seat in the state of South Carolina, and the Democrat governor went to the district and tried to help. In the special elections in the South, conservatives do a better job at getting their folks out. And what that did when that governor came into that district, it helped me motivate people to get out about how important it was for conservative values and conservative issues, and I think it'll actually have the exact opposite effect. I think it'll make these Republicans in Alabama remember that they don't want any more of the last 8 years they in fact had, and even if they're not the biggest fan of the Republican candidate, they will get out and support that candidate because of the bigger picture of what it will do to the United States Senate.
That's what I was wondering, if it would actually help the Republican in this case. What about, though, Dan, let's play it through, and let's say Roy Moore wins. Let's say the Republican wins in this case. Do you think in the end, even though obviously that's not what, your team, what Democrats want, might there be a bigger win long term? Obviously, they've telegraphed that they want to use this in the 2018 midterms and beyond.
No, I don't think it's a bigger win. I think we should do everything we can with the Republicans or Democrats to keep people who are accused of molesting children out of the United States Senate. Now, this is a man who was banned from the mall for being too creepy to young girls. And this shouldn't be the fact that it's even a partisan issue, the fact that the Republican president is campaigning for this accused child molester is a problem. Republicans are going to have to answer for their support for sexual assaulters, whether it's Roy Moore or Donald Trump in the 2018 election, regardless of what happens on Tuesday.
Okay. While I have both the two of you, the topic that we've really been talking about the last hour or so is one of the most contentious White House briefings we've seen in quite a while. When Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was asked about these Trump accusers initially, and then about these attacks that the president keeps lobbying, weaponizing these attacks on the media. Watch.
I would just say, Sarah, that journalists make honest mistakes, and that doesn't make them fake news. But the question that
But when journalists make honest mistakes, they should own up to them. Sometimes, and a lot of times you don't. But there's a difference. There's a very big... I'm sorry. I'm not finished. There's a very big difference between making honest mistakes and purposefully misleading the American people, something that happens regularly. You can't say, I'm not done. You cannot say... You cannot say that it's an honest mistake when you're purposely putting out information that you know to be false, or when you're taking information that hasn't been validated, that hasn't been offered any credibility, and that has been continually denied by a number of people, including people with direct knowledge of an instance. This is something that... I'm speaking about the number of reports that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'm simply stating that there should be a certain level of responsibility in that process.
This was not,
Brian, I called on Jim.
This is not the line of questioning that I was going down, but can you cite a specific story that you say is intentionally false, that was intentionally put out there to mislead the American people?
Sure. The ABC report by Brian Ross, I think that was pretty misleading to the American people, and I think that it's very telling that that individual had to be suspended because of that reporting. I think that shows that the network took it seriously and recognized that it was a problem.
Sarah,
Jim?
If I may, though, I was going to ask a question about something else.
Well, you used it on something else. Jim?
Sarah, if I may...
Sarah, not today. We're going to keep moving, guys.
If I can ask about the other...
So clearly the White House is on the defense, right? And when they start punching and fake news, but as we were having a conversation before about how reporters are human beings and make mistakes, honest mistakes, but it's never, ever intentional. And Dan, we're just wondering, as a former White House communications director, what you made of that.
Well, look, I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a ridiculous individual. That every part of that was ridiculous, and it was designed for an audience of one, Donald Trump. And I assume she believes that of the 4 to 8 hours of television he watches every day, 1 hour is her briefing. And what is dangerous about this is that it is the White House press secretary, which is always a partisan position. She has turned it into propaganda where she's trying to nullify the idea of objective truth. The reason they're going after CNN is not just because of the mistake CNN made or the mistake that Dave Weigel from Washington Post made the other day. It is so to try to convince their supporters and others in the country to not believe the other stories that CNN does about Mueller, about the women who Trump sexually assaulted. And that is a very dangerous thing for democracy. It is so far out of bounds of the norms of what Republican or Democratic White Houses have done in the past.
One of the reporters in the room, Brian Caron, we talked to him after the fact, and he argued that the White House apparently, that the White House apparently doesn't hold the president to the same standard, considering his history of falsehoods.
Well, number one, I think everybody, even including Al Franken, deserves due process. Number two, she asked to give an example, and she gave a very truthful example of what's happened. I know I have been the victim of a major news. Well, maybe it wasn't, but there are intentional times. I've had news stations say something about me that they knew had absolutely no truth, but they knew it was damaging, and they put it out there anyway without any facts to back it up, and that's dangerous. And so I understand their frustration, no matter whether it's Republican or Democrat, for any news organization, I don't care what level it's at, print media, whatever, to make an accusation that they can't back up or know that may not be true. That's dangerous for the American public to be susceptible to. And so everybody should have repercussions if they know they're throwing out stuff that really doesn't have truth to it.
It's just, it's angering as a member of the media to watch. We want to do good work each and every day, and occasionally mistakes are made. I just would sit here and argue, I know a lot of wonderful people in this profession, and we make honest mistakes. It is not intentional, and it's a double standard with this White House. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I've made mistakes, and people have corrected me. I came back and said, hey, look, I made an honest mistake. I called Simone Sanders a senator the other day, and so sometimes it happens. I didn't mean to. I thought she was a senator. Somebody corrected me. But it does happen for times. But when someone does it to get a specific outcome when they know that's not true, I can understand the frustration of that.
Okay. Andre, Dan, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
CNN, by the way, will have special live coverage of the U.S. Senate race in Alabama until those final results are in. Please don't miss it. It starts tomorrow night, 5 o'clock Eastern, here on CNN. Next, some of these women who have accused President Trump of sexual harassment and assault are now coming forward today and calling officially for this congressional investigation. Now, 3 senators have explicitly asked for the president to resign. Hear from them coming up. Breaking news now on the suspect who was live and talking in this attempted Port Authority bomb attempt today. Let's bring in CNN national correspondent Bryn Gingras, who has some more information on this 27-year-old former taxi driver. Bryn, what have you learned?
Yeah, well, we've learned a lot, Brooke, from those conversations with investigators in the hospital room. It's the fact that we learned that he made this bomb, it appears, a week ago at his apartment. It's possible also he was making this at his work as well. He actually did some electrical work with his brother in this area of Port Authority not long ago, so it may give some reasoning as to why he possibly picked this area as a target. But one thing I really want to tell you, Brooke, that we've also learned that's new is that as you've shown your viewers, that video inside the Port Authority the moment this bomb went off, had a chance to take a clear look at that video from a source, and it's pretty incredible that no one was injured in this severely. And that's because when you look at the video that I saw, to the right of Ula, as he passes through that passageway, the bomb goes off to his right, and not a single person was walking next to him at that time. So it is remarkable, as busy as it was this morning, that no one was severely injured. I also want to let you know that we've confirmed through a source that there were nails also, or screws rather, also found at the scene here at the Port Authority, Brooke.
Totally frightening for those people this morning. Bryn Gingras, great sourcing. Thank you so much for your new reporting on that. Let's move along, though, to these 3 women who have very publicly accused President Trump of sexual misconduct. They are now today calling on Congress to investigate this. At least 15 women now have come forward with a wide range of accusations against the president. 13 of them say Trump attacked them directly. The other 2 say they witnessed behavior that made them feel uncomfortable. And although many of these accusers broke their silence during the 2016 presidential campaign, they are now re-emerging with this message.
I am hoping that this will come forward and produce enough pressure on Congress to address it, more than just for their own members, but to address it in the president.
I want to believe that as Americans we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things in fact do transcend politics, that we will hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as Harvey Weinstein and the other men who were held accountable for their reprehensible behavior. Therefore, I ask that Congress put aside their party affiliations and investigate Mr. Trump's history of sexual misconduct.
3 senators are also calling for the president to resign. They are Democrats Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, and Jeff Merkley. Today, Sarah Sanders, though, standing at that podium reaffirming the official White House stance on these women. Listen.
The president has addressed these accusations directly and denied all of these allegations, and this took place long before he was elected to be president, and the people of this country had a decisive election, supported President Trump, and we feel like these allegations have been answered through that process.
Maeve Reston is with me now, our CNN national political reporter, and so Maeve, the news piece of this is the fact that now you have Senator Gillibrand, just the latest to join this now growing list of Democrats calling for the president to resign. And obviously just because Kirsten Gillibrand says he should, I'm going to go with the fact that the president is not going to. But why is this significant moving forward?
Well, I think that this is, a very different political moment in many ways than where we were in 2016 when these women first emerged and when we first heard that tape with Billy Bush that President Trump has questioned, apparently, in recent times. But, you have to wonder whether if we were in this moment that we're in now with so many women coming forward about sexual harassment, would the election have been different? I mean, we know that certainly that tape hurt President Trump or hurt then candidate Trump among women, but he still won. Sarah Sanders is exactly right about that. And this is significant because I think that, the Trump administration is dealing with so many different problems right now. And you're seeing Democratic senators come forward and start going kind of a step further. They've stayed away from the impeachment word earlier on, but now on this issue, they're calling on him to resign, those 3 senators. And that is significant because it will affect the 2020 race. It brings in the question of who controls the House in 2018, because if Democrats take control, we could be looking at a very different scenario on Capitol Hill and with the White House. And it's just a cultural moment, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Donald Trump responds to these women in this moment.
100% agree, and I think what's really significant, because we know the White House line on this, and we heard Sarah Sanders again. The president's denying these claims. She's essentially saying he won. This has been dealt with. Let's all move along, please. But the fact that you have Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, in the president's cabinet, saying, in a sense, no, they need to be heard. That's a big deal. Here she was.
Women who accuse anyone should be heard. They should be heard and they should be dealt with. And I think we heard from them prior to the election. And I think any woman who has felt violated or felt mistreated in any way, they have every right to speak up.
What did you think when you saw her say that?
So that was a fascinating interview, and I also think that she is one of the most interesting people to watch right now.
Totally
because more than any other person who has closely associated themselves with Trump, Nikki Haley has done a fantastic job of just walking the line so she doesn't, get him publicly angry, but going far enough that she's preserving her own reputation and trying to set herself apart from the White House in places where she doesn't agree. If you parse her words very carefully, she didn't come out and say, I believe these women, I believe Trump's accusers, but she said women should be heard, basically that they should be vetted and they should feel good about coming forward. So if you have women around the country who are watching that, they could look at that and say, okay, she's working for Trump, but, maybe she's on my side, and yet she didn't go far enough probably to end up with a rebuke from Trump, because we all believe that she is going to run for president at some point. That's absolutely clear. She's been, considered for Secretary of State in the past, and her positioning has just been very smart all the way through this administration.
She is a woman to watch. Mae Reston, great analysis. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Coming up next here on CNN, an insurance company denies a potentially life-changing brain surgery for this teenage girl with epilepsy. We'll hear her response and why the company says it is only looking out for her best interest. A 15-year-old girl has a blunt message for the nation's third largest health insurance provider that is denying her request for brain surgery. Kara Pressman was just 9 years old when she started having seizures, and she has suffered from them ever since. Now 15, her insurance provider Aetna has said no to this minimally invasive procedure that could really change her life. Kara said she burst into tears when she heard the decision. So with me now, Wayne Drash, our senior writer for CNN Health, who has done extensive reporting on this story. So Wayne Drash, I should also, just as your friend, and I know you, your son has epilepsy, so this is something you are intimately familiar with as a father, and so it takes on a special meaning. I know this story. Tell me about Karen and how she's doing and how this could really change her life if she had this.
Well, Brooke, as you mentioned, Kara's message to Aetna was a pretty blunt one, and it was "screw you." Yeah. She was approved for a minimally invasive surgery. It's called laser ablation surgery, in which basically a small hole is drilled in the skull where the seizure activity is coming from in her brain. The heat kills that, and ideally you become seizure-free as a result, versus the alternative, which is essentially having a saw cut open your skull, having the top of your head removed and a chunk of your brain taken out, which is what very few people want to do willingly, because it's such a horrible situation to be put in, and the thought of going through a surgery like that is devastating.
Wow. So I know I know the story got all kinds of traction on CNN.com, and all kinds of people have reached out. Before we get into that, though, what has Aetna's response been?
Well, Aetna so far has maintained that they are denying her for this the laser ablation surgery